I'd like to get your thoughts first and foremost. As they go into the summit, they're not looking, these leaders, to adjust the stability fund, which with this firewall of worth €500 billion, most say, including Paul Volcker on this program last night, the former U.S. central bank chief, saying it's not big enough. Do you think that's the first thing they should tackle and look at long-term economic restructuring thereafter?
Yes, obviously, the fact that the bailout fund is very small increases the risk of the crisis to become even bigger in the future. And we know that G20 countries said to Europe that without chipping in more money from mostly Germany, there'd be no additional money coming from other countries. So the size of the bailout fund may be crucial in assessing the risk of the crisis being contained or being bigger going forward.
Yeah, we have some internal fighting now in Germany from the Bundesbank and the European Central Bank and Mr. Draghi. The Bundesbank is questioning this money that's flowing into the market being borrowed about 1%, some $700 billion, that this is going to haunt us in another year or two. Would you agree with that prognosis?
I think the funding 800 commercial banks with 1% 3-year-long funding is potentially very dangerous because you have Italian banks taking the funds and buying a lot of Italian bonds, Spanish banks doing the same with Spanish government bonds, which means that the risk of event in Italy is becoming more dangerous because if something happens to the bond market in Italy, definitely the risk is being bigger for Italian banks if the things happen in Spain to Spanish banks. So at the same time, you have North European banks running away from these countries and local banks getting their balance sheets loaded with government bonds more and more. This is going to produce much bigger crisis in the future than without such cheap funding.
Well, you mentioned the Italian debt situation right now. You're going short on Italian debt right now. You're shorting the CAC 40 in Paris, the DAX in Germany, some of the Euro 50 stocks. Are you able to make money during this time? Because the stock market actually has rallied back, thinking that the worst is over in this crisis.
Yes, we launched the fund last week, so actually I'm quite happy with the rally that we've seen, because with these valuations, the upside for the fund, which is short equities, short euro vis-a-vis the dollar and short Italian bonds, is growing. And this is one of the very few products sold to investors that offers good returns at times of the crisis, which may come. If this fund existed during the Lehman crisis, the returns would be 150%. So this is the scope for profits for investors who believe that current printing of cheap money will not solve the problem.
I want to talk about something in your neighborhood. You're not long on Poland right now. You say this administration is causing a lot of damage. We've seen what Prime Minister Orban has done in Hungary right now, changing the constitution. What are your thoughts on these markets right now, emerging markets of Central Europe?
I would agree with what IMF and the World Bank said in the recent reports, that this time around, the slowdown or recession in the West will be much more dangerous for developing countries, including Central and Eastern Europe. So it's now a good time to be short the region, and I'm short Poland and short the region as well.
Final question. Armageddon means the end of life, as you know. This is the historical interpretation of it. How about the Eurogeddon fund? When would its life end? When do you see the worst of this Euro crisis on the continent? Is your job going to be done in 5 years or less?
First of all, the name Eurogeddon is after Paul Krugman, who used this name in Twitter. I'm following Paul Krugman on Twitter, so that's where the name comes from. And about Eurogeddon in Europe, I'm telling my investors that the risk of the total collapse in the Eurozone is high within the next 3 years. So I'm telling them, invest money for the 3-year period. We don't know precisely when this will happen, but if it happens, your upside is about 200% from the credit event that will lead to Italian bankruptcy. And that's one of the very few products in Europe that offers this type of return profile.